Hello class, let's talk about savings and investment. What we have here is the GDP identity that we covered in Unit 2. Y stands for GDP, C stands for consumption, I for investment, G for government spending, and NX for net exports. Let's take the hypothetical example where my NX goes away. This is what we call a closed economy. We do this to avoid complications of capital flowing between countries because we are trying to see if there's a relationship between savings and investment. We want to know what investment is, so we need to use algebra to leave I by itself. Basically, I moved all the letters that were not I to the other side of the equation. And so I end up with investment equals GDP minus consumption minus government spending. If you think of the economy like a giant family, you can think of your GDP as your income. In fact, we sometimes call GDP national income. And of course, from that income, you're going to end up consuming. And if you think of the government as the bills you have to pay for your household, then we can think of that as well. We can take this analogy and translate it into an economy. And basically what you have left over after consumption has been made and government spending has been made is your national savings. We will annotate national savings with a capital S. So we end up having our first identity for savings and investment. Investment equals savings. How does investment equal savings? If you think about it, investment is basically expenditures that are done for the purchasing of capital. What are some examples of capital goods? Buildings, homes, equipment, machinery. Most of the time, these things are bought through a process called financing. Where business owners or homeowners go to a bank, a financial institution, get a loan, and pay for these types of goods. Basically, the funds that are used to finance capital goods for investment comes from our national savings. It is the financial system that allows this identity to be true. What this identity really means is that all savings eventually, through the financial system, turn into some sort of investment. Let's begin from our first identity. We're going to substitute the I with the initial definition for I, which was Y minus consumption minus government spending. We're also going to add a zero in the form of T minus T. T minus T mathematically equals 0. And what we're going to do with this positive T and negative T is that we're going to distribute them into different parts of the equation. Let's take the negative T. If I move the negative T over to the beginning of the equation, I can place it here. Now I have national income minus consumption minus taxes. This part of the equation can be interpreted as private savings. These are savings that come from the private sector, meaning private individuals. And now, this part of the equation can be interpreted as public savings. National savings come from a private part and a public part, meaning from the government. Let's analyze the public savings part a little bit further. A reduction in any type of savings reduces S, which implies that this is also going to reduce investment. Since S equals to I, investment will get smaller. Public savings is T minus G. This implies that all revenue for the government comes from taxes, which is realistic. If you have T minus G yielding a positive number, this implies that we have a budget surplus, meaning that the government spent less money than what came in through the process of taxation. That is scenario number 1. If this happens, that means that our savings go up. We can also have T equaling to G, or T minus G equaling 0. This means that we have a balanced budget, meaning that whatever revenue came in from taxes got spent. Thirdly, we're going to have the situation where T minus G gives us a negative number. This is what we call a budget deficit. This implies that savings will go down because the government spent more money than what came in through the process of taxation. This is the most interesting scenario out of all three. What are the implications of a budget deficit? Well, for one, it means that we are currently deficit spending. You might read about this or hear about this in the news. We understand that our savings will go down. And if our savings go down, this implies that our investment will go down. Other things constant, if our investment levels decrease, this can have negative effects on our GDP. The worry is that eventually this will affect our ability to invest in our growth. So how can we spend if we don't have enough money? We finance deficit spending through what we call T-bills or government bonds, which is another way of saying that the government borrows money. Who does the government borrow money from? Well, it can borrow from individuals or private citizens. It can borrow from other governments. Or it can just borrow from financial institutions. Any of these entities can purchase T-bills from the US federal government to finance whatever spending the government needs to make. These debts will have to be paid for eventually. And who's gonna be paying for this debt? Well, future generations. There is a worry that as future generations start paying the huge amount of debt, that investment levels will go down. So future generations will not have the same levels of investments that are needed to keep our economy going. Investments in education, infrastructure, and other things.